Yo, what's good, ladies and gentlemen? In tonight's transmission, we're going to be breaking down the sciences of the end times of what we call eschatology. But before we get into the transmission, I'm going to play my intro. We're going to do things a little bit different because, like I said, YouTube, they've been targeting my channel for reasons unknown. But we already know what time it is when it comes to that. But I'm going to play the intro, put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, because we in the end game, right? Because the science of the end times has everything to deal with prophetic divination, right? So we're going to get into cryptozoology, which basically interfaces with malevolent and benevolent entities, which are interdimensional, outer dimensional, extraterrestrial entities that come from a different star system and from cavern systems as well, right? Because there's an algorithm at hand, right? But I'm gonna play the intro.
Fidel 101.
Be Frankie. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back to the transmission at hand. Like I said, we're going to be breaking down uh, eschatology, which is the science of the end times and how it basically interfaces with everything as far as like prophecy. Prophecy that interfaces with biblical context, because we're going to get into the esoterics of El's Holy Injil, which is a transliteration of the book of Revelation. We're going to break it down tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Put the rice bowls in the chat. So let me get the screen share going here. So tonight's transmission, the basis of it is the age before disclosure, because disclosure is the blueprint for revelation. Because the revelation in itself is the great revealing, the revealing of the unseen hand, right? When you're talking about draconian reptilians, that's interfacing with the black nobility archonic forces that controls everything as far as like, these geopolitical leaders and everything in government, world governments specifically. But everybody share this video because it's one of those things where, you know, conspiracy theorists, we've been right the whole time. Conspiracy theorists, we've been right the whole time, right? They try to say that we was crazy when really we was just early. We was early the whole time. We was the Indians that looked over the mountain and seen the promised land. We seen the promised land of information that's transmuting through the energy of the golden age, right? Because like I said, this is where your tinfoil hat transmutes into a crown of knowledge, right? So the chosen ones, we up by 144,000 points. You know what I'm saying? The black sheep of the family, we up 144,000 points. Everybody, you know what I'm saying, that's been castigated for knowing certain information about this world, you know what I'm saying, you are up 144,000 points, ladies and gentlemen, because we are the 144,000. Just like they extrapolate in biblical and many different forms of folklore context. Now, this is what they've been putting out in the multimedia news. It says 4 alien species have been pulled from crash UFO, ex-government researcher claims, right? So there's a lot of stuff that they're putting inside the media because, like I said, the media has to correlate with the script that's acclimated to monotheistic religion, whether it's through the Talmud, the Holy Quran, whether it's through the damn Bible, whatever. All forms of monotheistic religion has to coincide with the energy of the energy extraction matrix. It has to follow the blueprint of the simulation. It has to follow the blueprint of the multimedia news because the physical world has to interface with, the great majority of the scripture that was created by these archonic forces, because a lot of people don't understand that the great majority of the religion that you follow was created by draconian reptilians, right? Because draconian law is acclimated to Greco-Roman culture. Draconian law is ecclesiastical law, which is canon law, which is maritime law, which is interconnected to the corporation. So the blueprint of the corporation was created by these archonic forces. But when you see these business owners or whatever, they're basically like a microcosmic aspect of it. So the same way these world leaders and these big banksters, they run their simulation and their corporations, is basically the same way these draconian reptilians and these alien species run the simulation. So the same way that Donald Trump, uh, Elon Musk, Rothschilds, because some of these entities, these people are actually, entities or whatever. But what I'm saying is that the great majority, they're following the blueprint of their archonic forces when you get into the Gnostic texts, right? So that's when you get into the philosophy of like Yaldabaoth and Yahweh and things of that nature. But we finna get right back to that because Yahweh is an extraterrestrial entity. So it tells you right here, Gray Alien in their reaction has folks online conceive weren't alone. They have a word for aliens, but recognize immediately called the Makumba Waba, however you say that. So this is interconnected to the Hopi mythology. It says that they live underground. So according to the Hopi mythology that's coming from indigenous culture, our culture, the autochthonous people, the indigenous Mers, that once fought against these entities in the old times, right? Right before you had many different, resets before the flood of Noah. You had many different floods before the flood of Noah, but they don't even talk about in the Bible. So in the inception of time, you had to go against these entities, right? You had Zeta Reticular Grays. You got I forgot what they this is another form of a gray, but they show you the reality of this, prophecy in the movie Jupiter Ascending. They show you how these grays is able to have a corporeal and a non-corporeal form, meaning that they able to go into a vaporized state. Because when you live in a three-dimensional world, you got to understand that everything is cultivated by the three states of matter: gases, liquids, solids. So extraterrestrial entities can be in the form of a vapor, a liquid, or it could be in a form of the condensed of subatomic particles, which is basically the embodiment of physical matter, perhaps. So it says a Brazilian tribe members who never heard of the aliens immediately recognize photo of gray. They live underground. So you got underground entities in the planet. So Dr. York was right. Dr. York, that's why, they had to lock him up. There's a reason why he's doing, that many years in prison. Why? Because he was privy to certain information, right? He knew about, what I'm saying, the trinary star systems. When you're talking about Ilihun, Ilihun is a real place because Ilihun is Iliyah in the Holy Quran, right? Iliyah is interconnected to the Orion star constellation because it tells you in the Bible that heaven is in the Orion, Uranus. That's why when you're talking about the four alien species, they was on the news talking about the goddamn Pleiadians, the Nordics, because it tells you in Job chapter 38, verse 30, because in that verse it says that unloosen the belt of Orion. Yeah, Pleiades unloosens the belt of Orion because the Pleiadian star constellation that is ruled by Ashtar Command is interfacing with the moon, with the Draconian reptilians and the insectoids, where they control the great majority of artificial intelligence on the dark side of the damn moon. Because, like I said, this is why you live in an energy extraction matrix. The moon is a satellite for these entities. If it wasn't real, then why are they putting it in the damn news, right? Because that's why I keep telling people, a lot of people, they cannot fathom, you know, the ideology and the imagery that there are extraterrestrial entities. When you get into ontological artifacts, it tells you by way of imagery, it tells you by way of neoclassical art, it tells you that these entities exist, but you pass it off as exotic art and this is just some entertainment. Nah, this shit is real, right? If it wasn't real, it wouldn't be put in the motherfucking arts, because everything that the ancients seen in the old times, they used to extrapolate it by way of emotional energy through the arts, right? Hold on, I'm gonna play this video for you guys. But they tell you in the Hopi prophecy, right? But in the Bible, they tell you angels and demons. They don't say extraterrestrial entities, right? Everybody put the rice bowls in the damn chat. So we're gonna stop the share. So I'm gonna play this video for you guys.
We are not alone. The Pentagon released the UFO files a few weeks back, and we just found out over 1 billion people have visited the site. 1 billion. It's got to be a record. The War Department says more files will be released soon. UFO experts and top researchers have been investigating aliens for years. Their sources say dozens of crashed UFOs have been recovered, and what they found inside, shocking.
And do people think that there's one type of non-human intelligence that's visiting the Earth, or is there many, many types?
People who have been involved in recoveries have said
there are at least 4 types, 4 separate types.
I need you to understand something. Just like when it comes to monotheistic religion, they try to banish the imagery of so-called black people. So the same thing translates when you're talking about cryptozoology, when you're talking about UFOlogy. They try to make it seem like these extraterrestrial entities are only so-called European looking, or they just look like they grays. They don't want you to they don't want to tell you that these motherfuckers look just like me and you, right? Futuristic black people that come from a different timeline because they have the ability of time dilation with interface transitions. This is how they're able to jump timelines. That's what a P47 is, a P47 and a P50. The present time plus the future, 47,000 years, 50,000 years, right? Because that's how you manipulate the frequency of time. Because time in itself, the sequence of the numbers, is a metaphysical codex. And the codex in itself is the sigil, and the sigil is the only thing that has the ability to unlock the golden gate to where you're basically able to go into different dimensional timelines. That's why I was talking about the mechos. A mecho is a magnetospheric, externally collapsing object, right? You open that with the codexes of the cosmos, because like I said, the interface transitions the energies of the sun. When you got the light within you, you interface with that spiritual sun, right? That's how you jump timelines, because the heart in itself is a fractal interstellar vortex portal. You become a quark in a lepton, the God particle. You are basically a walking time machine. So that's why I said, they don't want you to know by way of your physiology, so-called black people, that you are the personification of these entities. Because like I said, a lot of these entities, just like in nature, everything starts from black. So that means that everything in the goddamn cosmos starts from black. So everything in the inception of time that created, was created by way of physical matter has to be black as well. Or melanated, carbonated, right? So that's just common sense. But because nothing in nature, is actually, white or recessive or anything that has eukaryotic cells, which is spliced DNA, right? But like I said, since you live in a dualistic paradox, they got to give you the truth with the damn lie. But so they try to make it seem like, just like in religion, they try to make it seem like all the angels are only the European looking ones or the Hindu looking ones or whatever. They don't want to tell you that they look like me and you, right? That's why you think they call you black people? Why you think they call you black people? Turn that off. Hold on for a second, guys.
It's changing their MO every time so that we don't connect them.
I thought you said they always use some kind of diversion.
Last night was the diversion. Halloween and
Turn
Los
it off.
Angeles.
Just hit the X button.
Parade.
Why you think they call you black people? They call you black people because black is another way to basically block out something, to keep in secret. Why they want to keep you in secret? Because you have a secret DNA that interfaces with the spiritual sun, which makes you the Christ, which makes you the Superman, where you got the motherfucking S on your damn chest, which is the serpent with the pyramid in the middle. Pyramid in the middle, which is the fire in the middle by way of the tachyon energy that we was talking about on the African Spirituality podcast, right? So that's what I'm saying. So a lot of these alien entities, they look just like me and you. Yes, you got some European ones. Yeah, you got different, species, and you got Proconians. A lot of them look like, a Hindu type of phenotype, but when you get into the races and all that, when it comes to the 4 different types of alien races or whatever, it's more different types of this or whatever. But when you get into the inception of creation, the real alien is the so-called black person. I'm gonna play this video. But just like I said, in religion, they try to make it seem like it ain't no black angels, just like in when you go to the Gaia channel and all these other UFO channels or whatever, and conspiracy channels, they try to make it seem like only the aliens are European descent when they're not. When Europeans even tell you that they're black, which is why they killed David Wilcock, right? I'm gonna keep going.
Now, I have not had direct access to that, but I believe the people who I talk to.
4 different types of life.
4 different types of life.
4 different species of aliens. Another scientist called them Greys, Nordics, Insectoids, and Reptilians. All of them have 2.
Like I said, if it wasn't real, they wouldn't put it in the damn news. Why are they putting it in the news? Because we're in the golden age. The golden age is cultivated by the energy of the sun. The sun is going to reveal what? Reveal everything, which is revelation, which is full disclosure. Ladies and gentlemen, put the rice bowls in the chat.
2 arms and 2 legs, just like us. Experts speculate the reptilians are scaly with long tails like a lizard. Insectoids look like a praying mantis. The Greys look like your classic movie alien, and the Nordics look like a regular Swedish guy, but 7 feet tall. We haven't seen the evidence, but Pete Hegseth says more evidence is coming, and there are a lot of believers in Congress.
I have seen evidence in a skiff that leads me to believe there are things we cannot explain, and I have observed things that are of non-human origin and creation. That's my opinion.
Releasing the files isn't easy. They've been hidden for years, and a lot of people want to keep it that way.
The problem we have right now is the deep state's fighting the president on release, and he kept his word.
See, look, they try to make it seem like that the deep state is fake. This is coming out of a congressman's mouth. He's talking about the deep state. But why? The thing is that, the deep state is controlled by the Albion European, which is the Ashkenazi Jew, which is also controlled by the Zionists. The Zionists, they do the bidding of the draconian reptilian, which is why Dr. York in his book, he said verbatim, the evil reptilian gave power to the beast. The reptilian is the archon. The beast is the Canaanite. The Canaanite is them people in Israel who controls America. So the deep state is being controlled by Israel. So that's why I said Donald Trump, he's playing both sides. The deep state is America. Anything that's connected to the corporation is America. Anything that's connected to America and their philosophy of draconian law is, pretty much, connected to Zionism. So the deep state, like I said, they are controlled by them people over in Israel, right?
And I suspect some of our not so friendly comrades in some of our alphabet agencies are slow walking a lot of information. It's about power, it's about control, and that's kind of what runs Washington.
So why is our own government fighting so hard to keep these secret? Well, a dozen scientists have either gone missing or died. Now, we don't know if that's related, but people are scared to talk.
One I thought was going to do an interview, and then a couple days before sent me a message saying, after further consideration and long talks with my wife, I decided I'd be forfeiting my life if I participated in your interview. And I thought that was like very unsettling message to get, obviously, but also very specific word choice, you know, forfeiting my life.
Dan Fair is the director and producer of The Age of Disclosure, the film that started to shake loose the UFO files. All right, Dan, what have you heard about these different breeds of alien life?
Look, a number of the people I interviewed in my film, senior intelligence officials, went on the record saying that there have been dozens of crashed craft of non-human origin over the years, and elements of our government have recovered those crashes, and they've gotten out of that technology of non-human origin, and in some cases, non-human bodies that were on these craft. A number of the people in my film go on the record saying that the bodies were not all the same type, meaning there were multiple species.
Were the bodies alive or were they dead?
The people in my film talked about events where they were dead bodies, they were deceased bodies.
Okay, and there's a lot of speculation about the amount of UFO information we've been given.
And also, again, remember I was telling you guys in the last video, what they're showing you is the North Star Polaris. That's what they're showing you. This is the star outside the firmament, right? And I'm going to extrapolate that knowledge as we get into Els Holy Angel, which is a transliteration of the book Revelation. It talks about how everything within the simulation is interfaced with a dome, which is able to crystallize, right? Because the interface is kind of like the same concept of, like, look at planet Earth as basically like a cell inside the body. And each cell has, you know, a protectorate bubble, has a nuclei, a protectorate, and over the course of time, you know, it has to go through, you know, a state of metamorphosis, just like how the planet has to go through a state of metamorphosis, your body and your cells and everything as well. So the same thing takes place, like, you know, when you're talking about single cell, some black people don't never catch it. It goes, they get not single cell, they don't get malaria. We get single cell. The single cell in itself is a representation of crystallization. Crystallization is a representation of protection. So in Dr. Blackazi York's book, he talks about how in the book of John, of how the dome is supposed to crystallize, because the planet Earth in itself is basically a extraction of the cells of God, right? I mean, it's kind of hard. It's a hard, you know, complex, but we're going to get into it as we get through the transmission. But what they've been showing you in the news is the North Star Polaris, which is the galactic center, and the galactic center is the true spiritual sun, which is the Christ. This is the spiritual celestial body that gives off energy to where you become the Christ, right? That's why in the Superman, they were showing you the damn crystal. This is the crystal because the North Star Polaris is what activates the neuroendocrine transducer. You have a transducer in your motherfucking brain, right? To where you transduce the gold elixir to where you interface with the cosmic energy. That's gamma radiation. That's what makes you a god. Incredible Hulk, right? That's gamma radiation. That's the green Ethereum frequency. That's the spirit of Melchizedek. The sigil of Melchizedek, like I was telling y'all, would look like this. Look like this, just this damn star, like I've been telling y'all. So this is, they try to make it seem like it's kind of like a spaceship. No, it's not. This is the North Star Polaris outside the dome. You heard it here first.
Is non-human bodies that were on these craft. A number of the people in my film go on the record saying that the bodies were not all the same type, meaning there were multiple species.
Were the bodies alive or were they dead?
The people in my film talked about events where they were dead bodies, they were deceased bodies.
Okay, and there's a lot of speculation about the amount of UFO information we've been given on this first tranche. We expected more. We know there is more. Why do you think people inside the government are fighting so hard to release more?
Yeah, so the president gave his directive in middle of February, essentially instructing all federal agencies to declassify evidence of non-human intelligent life and UAP. What happened after that is the White House had to go get that evidence out of the hands of all these federal agencies, and they all, for the most part, pushed back. The people who have gatekept this information for 80 years, they don't want to share it. You know, they've gotten a lot of power and control over the years, and it's just frankly not human nature for people to want to give up power and control. So there's a tug of war happening behind the scenes. There are a number of other reasons guiding their desire to keep this secret, including a general belief that the public can't handle the truth. I would argue the public can handle the truth. I think my film shows that. People aren't watching it and jumping out of windows. They're curious and they want to learn more. There's also a general feeling that, a concern that they can't tell the American public what they know and don't know without also telling our adversaries and giving them some sort of advantage. But I think that that's not really accurate. I think our adversaries know we're not alone in the universe. They know we've been recovering craft of non-human technology, non-human origin. Saying it out loud wouldn't give them any new information.
Is there
Those base
also,
facts can be shared.
like, the credibility factor? You know, this is a government that's lied to us about a lot of things for a lot of years, and this was one of the big ones. You were called crazy if you even suggested anything like this. And now they're releasing files admitting that it was actually real.
See, they just like they try to call the master teacher, Dr. Malachi Z. York, they try to call him crazy. He tried to call him a cult leader and threw him in a maximum prison because of the information that he knew, right? You know what I'm saying? A lot of the, condolences to, all the scientists that came up missing and, passed away or whatever. But the first person who was on this information was Dr. York, right? He was the sacrificial lamb for what's basically taking place as far as like the age of information. He was on top of that shit first, right? He was one of them ones. He was a chosen one. So that's why, a lot of times when one of the first ones when it comes to information, they're going to demonize you in the multimedia news. But now when you can get on the news now and they'll say, oh, such and such figured this out first. No, Dr. York, he done figured all this shit out a long time ago, right? Now we're just being used as a catalyst, like myself and other people who was putting out information. We're basically being used as an anchor in a bridge to help people understand and understand clarity about what's going to be taking place in the Great Awakening period, right? So that's how you basically, how you basically, make sure you got your ducks in a row when it comes to the future, right? Because like I said, if you don't have the past conjoining with the present day future, or whatever, like when you're talking about the modern day teachers, that's the only way you can activate, a certain energy in the next world. So you got to have the past meeting the present. So that's why a lot of the new teachers like myself and Bro Yosef and a lot of people, Red, Blue Pill, a lot of us, you know what I'm saying? Like you got to touch in with the old crowd because that's how you manipulate the timeline. That's the past meeting the present.
Are they trying to protect themselves, their own credibility?
Yeah, there's certainly an element of that. I mean, no one wants to take accountability. A lot of people's lives were ruined over the years covering this up. A lot of careers were ruined. And, one of the other concerns people who involved in keeping the secret have is the fact that they're worried about coming forward, sharing evidence they have, and then being punished for it, being treated like criminals. And so there are members of Congress right now who are trying to put together amnesty language to give protections to these people so they can step forward more comfortably.
If they did end up releasing an image or a video of non-human life recovered from a craft, and they put that out there, what do you think the public reaction would be?
I mean, truthfully, I think this day and age, with the rise of AI, half the country would probably think it's an AI image and not real. That's why I think, my film has
Exactly. We've been saying that. That's the whole reason why they putting out all this stuff with AI, because it's to basically, deflect the truth. Because also during the time they have a this thing called a simulation pushback. A simulation pushback is where something exposes the matrix. Like hypothetically speaking, let's just say I see a UFO, like a big UFO, and I take a picture of it. A simulation pushback is like a built-in firewall system that basically rejects anything that exposes the energy extraction matrix. So the picture I took of the UFO, it basically came back blurry. Or if I'm trying to film a Bigfoot or whatever, the video is going to look very blurry. It's going to look real pixelated. So a lot of times that's what a simulation pushback is.
move the needle because it's credible people putting their reputations on the line to share what they legally can. And there's
So we got that. And since we're speaking on the draconian reptilian, like I said, a lot of these entities, right? This was on the news today, ladies and gentlemen. Because like I said, I don't give a fuck what you say. If aliens wasn't real, while at the time they're speaking of full disclosure and extraterrestrial entities, why do you have people on national television wearing a mask, right? Because like I said, during the time of the sun cycle, you're not going to be able to hold your form, right? Because especially if you have recessive eukaryotic cells, those neutrinos is going to break down the epidermis layer of your skin, right? It's going to break down that collagen because you ain't got that protection, right? You ain't got that protection to activate those granulations and prominences, which are basically sun heat genes. Sun heat genes that interfaces with the sun. You ain't got that ability. So this is why they put the skin mask on. So a lot of these entities, as far as like Canaanites, Canaanites, like I said, they're not only European. You got European, you got Asian, um, Oriental forms of Canaanites or whatever. Canaanites is not only subjected to the European. Anybody who's telling you that is giving you misinformation. It's a coalition of a cursed bloodline. Just like you have every race of the human race, you got every race that's interconnected to the demographics of the Canaanite, right? That's why you got to study bloodline. So this guy right here is wearing a skin mask. So he could basically be a humanoid gray, or he could be a humanoid draconian reptilian. He can be like his underneath that mask, his actual physical self could be, his reptilian self can be interfacing with his actual physical vessel to the point where he got to put on the mask. Because, like I said, we just came out of a intrinsic solar radiation Schumann resonance spike recently. This is why a lot of people been getting a lot of energetic shifts in the body. So I'm gonna play this video and look at the mask. You can see the mask.
In the eyes of the Iranian people, but the world global economy, which they're holding all hostage to, the more everybody comes to realize this is all about the IRGC. At the end of the day.
So like I said, they are playing games with you. Everybody share this video, right? Because just like they've been showing you in The Simpsons, when they pull off the motherfucking mask, there's entities underneath there, right? So a lot of these entities, a lot of these people that you see on the multimedia news or whatever, a lot of them are skinwalkers. A lot of them are, like I said, these are deep state actors, right? So I'm gonna keep playing this video, but look at the neck part right here. He's wearing a mask. What's the point of that? What you trying to hide?
Need a government in Iran that not only hands over the nuclear material, stops threatening the Straits of Hormuz, but quits exporting the Islamic Revolution throughout the region, causing the collapse of Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, Syria.
So like I said, now we're going to get into, once we get into that, all right, we're going to get back to the screen share. Everybody put the rice bowls in the chat. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we back to the transmission. So they've been talking about underground entities, and I just showed you a man. Like I said, he could be a humanoid gray, he could be a humanoid draconian reptilian, or he can be a humanoid insectoid. Right? These entities exist, and then you got Nephilim. Right? You also, just like you have, like I said, giants is an extraterrestrial race. You know, being a giant is an extraterrestrial race. Because like I've been telling y'all in the Bible, it says in the Bible, in the book of Enoch, it said that giants are real, right? Because when you look at the word Nephilim, it comes from the Hebrew word Nephala, which means fallen angel. And they said that they were 9 cubits of a man. 1 cubit of a man is 18 inches. 18 times 9 equals 163 inches, divided by 12, you get 13.5 feet. So a lot of these, entities, 8 feet, 7 feet, 13 feet, 15 feet, these entities exist. So this is he's probably like a branch of a bloodline of giants. So John Rogan was an 8 feet 9 inches tall son of a formerly enslaved sharecroppers, and he got around on a cart pulled by goats. He turned down every sideshow ever. When he died in 1905, his family buried him under concrete so nobody could dig him up. Right? So, like I said, man, extraterrestrial entities exist. So you got the I am an Exodus, ex-Chilean encounter that made believe UFOs are work of Satan. And yes, and now this is where we get into the Chud the Builder. Because a lot of times, a lot of people don't understand what's taking place at hand. Because when you look at the nomenclature title of Chud the Builder, builder is equated to an architect. An architect is a Freemason, meaning that they have the ability to build or destroy. That's chaos and order. So Chud the Builder, he is being used as a deep state catalyst to cause chaos, to spark up a revolution amongst black people in the name of a civil war, right? That's what they was using him for, but he failed. Because one thing you got to understand about the name Chud, when you break down the etymological roots of the word Chud, it is a derogatory word which means boorish, unintelligent, right? Or a right-wing political views. So, he more than likely was a Trump supporter. His name means jerk, loser, troll. And mind you, there was a movie that came out in 1984 called Chud, right? Now, when I looked up this movie called Chud, everything, like I said, nothing in the simulation is not a coincidence. Everything is interconnected by way of binary code and gematria. So when I looked up his name, Chud, the word Chud is interconnected to this movie because Chud stands for cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. That's what Chud means. Now, when I looked up the imagery of the movie Chud that came out in 1984, what do we got here? It looks like a draconian reptilian, ladies and gentlemen. So, from my opinion, from my own independent research, Chud the Builder is being used as a catalyst for energy harvesting. He is being used to siphon the energy of black people so the archonic forces, the draconian reptilians, the Chuds, can feed off of it. That's why he was going around causing chaos. That's what everything, as far as what the energy extraction matrix is to cause chaos. Because when you got chaos, you're in fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, that pumps up the adrenaline. That pumps up the adrenaline so much to the point where they can extract the lucius from your body. And lucius itself is a spiritual form of sustenance. It's spiritual energy that's interconnected to a form of fear, right? That's why they was using him. So a Chud, so like I said, Chud, 1984, Draconian Reptilian, looks just like the entity that Credo Mutwa was talking about when you was talking about the Chitahari, right? Now, Credo Mutwa, he was the highest priest on the land before he died. He had more spiritual rank on the land, on planet Earth, than the Pope. So he knew about these entities. He knew about these entities in the inception of time. And he also talked about in Zulu mythology how they towed the moon into our solar system, right? Like I've been telling y'all, they use the moon as a catalyst to harvest the energy. That's why they want the data centers. The data centers is being used to suck up microscopic waves of energy and upload it to the moon to cause illumination. That's why Bill Gates, he purchased uh, the Codex Leicester. The Codex Leicester, look that up. The Codex Leicester is another way to propagate an illumination of the energy of the moon during the time of the golden age, to where the silver key combats the golden key. That's another way to where they can basically it's like a sacrifice. So that's why I was talking about in the smorgasbord event, but that's a whole different transmission. When you're talking about these entities coming from the caverns of the earth and they come to the surface to feed on humanity, to feed off the sustenance, human data. So these entities, like I said, this image that Credo Mutwa, these drawings was out, way before this movie came out in 1984, right? Not a coincidence. It looks just like them. And one thing you got to understand about old 1984 horror movies or whatever, horror movies in the 1970s, the 80s, and the 90s, a lot of the producers, they were occultists. So a lot of them were privy to certain information, right? That's why the guy from Marvel's and Marvel Comics and DC Comics, they used to come visit Credo Mutwa, and they take some of his ideologies and they put it inside the movies. Facts. So, like, if it wasn't real, they wouldn't be coming to see the man, or they wouldn't be putting in the damn movie. So, a Chud is a Draconian reptilian and a Chitahari. So, a Chud is a half Draconian hybrid, and a Chitahari is an alien warrior race, which is a Draconian reptilian, right? Everything that you're seeing when you're talking about Chud or whatever, because it's not a coincidence that all this information is coming to the forefront while you got alien disclosure, being propagated on the news. So, like I said, builder, like I said, his name is Chud the Builder. A builder is a person that's interconnected to Freemasonry. He's an architect, right? So I think I got another video for you guys. Yep, I got another video for you guys. But before we go there, so like I said, NASA wants to go extremely deep into Uranus in 2030. You know why? Because Gemini, that'll be 3 years right before Gemini and the Gemini Uranus conjunction is over with, because that is the Christ energy. That is the Gemini. The Gemini energy is the dualistic energies of Thoth, right? That's the spirit of Melchizedek during that time period, because that's 3 years right before you have the open vortex in 2033. Now, like I said, just like in the video I showed you guys, with the guy wearing a skin mask. When you're talking about El Nino 9 weather, El Nino 9 weather is not only subjected to the big bodies of water on planet Earth, it's also interconnected to the atmosphere, because that's when the atmosphere transmutes into fourth octave ether. Fourth octave ether is where you have an influx of neutrinos that sparks the Schumann resonance, where you have the Schumann flu. This is why the great majority of people during the past few days been feeling sick than a motherfucker. If you look around right now, unmistakable patterns sweeping through. So what you're seeing is that the ethers is basically going through a recalibration process. So it's manipulating the inorganic, archonic AI interference countermeasures, right? So that's why I said interface transitions. So when you have El Nino 9 weather, it's not only subjected to the big bodies of water, you also have El Nino 9 weather in the atmosphere. So El Nino 9 weather Also, is when you have the waters from the spiritual waters from the east collaborate with the waters from the west, and that's when you have the activation of the seven thunders or the seven plagues that they talk about in the Bible. But we're going to get into that in the end of the video, because Dr. York, he talks about that as well. So it tells you that the El Nino of this caliber being predicted. New data reveals 100% of chance super El Nino forming this year, right? So the Schumann resonance spike. So what the global population is experiencing is a dual force convergence. It is the collision of an intense organic solar cephalic acceleration slamming directly into the frantic, screeching electromagnetic countermeasures of inorganic synthetic matrix. So, like I said, everything is being manipulated by way of the binary code. So, the expanded diagnostic, the collective symptoms, when you're talking about your nervous system, which creates your energetic morphic field, which creates geometric energy fields around the body, because that's the electrical energy, the fascia that interfaces with your nervous system. Because, like I said, if you ain't got no motherfucking electricity running through your body, you ain't got no protection, pretty much. So, when these two opposing fields clash, the human nervous system acts as a biological transceiver catching the crossfire. This is a breakdown of specific widespread physical and emotional upgrades occurring across the planet right now. So just like how you upgrading the Canaanite, the cursed seed of Labana, the cursed seed of the Amorite, the Tamahu, they're breaking down. You're upgrading, they're breaking down. That's why I said everything is about the energy of the race against the sun. Because like I said, the sun, this is, like I said, this is just my opinion and my own independent research. Everything in the firmament is fake, including the sun. The sun is nothing but a portal for ascension. It's a portal for you to escape the matrix. The moon is a portal for reincarnation. If you keep fucking up, that's what the moon is for. If you graduate, you go through the sun and you go back to the star Polaris, which is why they were showing that little hovering. They try to make it seem like it was a UFO. That's not a UFO. That is the North Star Polaris that operates on fractions of light, angles of light, angels of light to the sun and the moon. So when your body is going through an interface transition and you're going through an upgrading or whatever, that's what it's all about. It's about genetic self-preservation. They're breaking down as you upgrade. That's why the great majority of everything, as far as like the corporation, is based on eugenics. Eugenics is all about extracting the vitality in exchange for money. You get what I'm saying? That's why everything is based on, energy extraction. So as you're upgrading, they're downgrading, right? The cursed seed. That's why the guy had a motherfucking mask on. So this is why, a lot of you been having cranial headaches, like my girl, depression, not the depression, but the cranial headaches, vivid dreams, sickness, nausea. But this is why, this is basically ascension symptoms, right? Everybody get a screenshot of this. So then we're going to get into this after I show you this video. It tells you right here, accelerating federal permitting of data center infrastructure. So the data centers, like I said, they're being used to siphon the energy to suck you right back into the moon. And in this video, I believe this lady says that she's is to make you reincarnate through the satellite or something. I gotta find the video. Well, where she says it in the video. So I know where it's at, but we're gonna play the video here in a second. Everybody put those rice bowls in the chat.
Ministers will also proceed with the introduction of digital ID that will modernize how citizens interact with public services.
And then also Starmer has made.
And everybody, man, hit that like button, man, because like I said, we can't push the hype button no more. So the only way to push the video in the algorithm is you just got to share it now, because like I said, they're trying to do stuff to my YouTube page. Like I said, I don't have any strikes. I don't got no violations. I don't, go against the YouTube rules. And, I pretty much speak in code for the most part. But what I'm saying, I just know my page is being watched heavily, what I'm saying, for the simple fact that I'm able to extrapolate certain information to the public, whether if it's, the older demographic or the younger demographic, and they don't want that. But anyhow, yeah, get the likes up. And also, like I said, I ain't got the hype button, so get the likes up, push the video on the algorithm, and share the video. And over 70% of the people who watch the channel, they not subscribed, so hit that subscribe button, ladies and gentlemen.
It clear now. Originally, it was going to be compulsory, but if they do impose this on us, and it was in the King's speech, by the way, they sneaked that in. If it's voluntary, let's all volunteer not to use digital ID cards. See how they get on.
Yeah, well, absolutely. This is the thing. So what ends up happening is it becomes very, very difficult when you've got 8 million directors that are being forced into one.
See, this is why, the corporations, like I said, maritime law is gaining jurisdiction through the Uniform Commercial Code. So that's why DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, is working with Anthropic, where they use these data centers as another way to interface with the digital ID systems. Like I said, everything is basically being used to suck up microscopic waves of energy from your body, the neurons from your body. Everything is being used to extract energy because they know that your physiology has to harmonize with these energies. So like I said, put it like this. It's kind of like how they do organ harvesting when it comes to black people. They're not doing, I mean, they still do it. What they doing now, they're basically siphoning energy from your body. So it's like spiritual harvesting, spiritual organ harvesting, put it pretty much. So like I said, they know that your body is getting all these upgrades, but in order to subjugate it, they got to hit you with the hanta. They got to hit you with, psychological operation after psychological operation, keep you in a state of fear. Activate another law, sign over a different executive order, right? Because like I said, fear in itself is a technology, right? Fear is a technology. It's a spiritual technology, a negative one. It is being used as a mechanism to lock you down to the silver cord, which is the silver key. So like I said, all forms of technology that basically manipulates the natural ether, the electricity in the body is pretty much demonic. So like I said, the digital ID system that's interconnected to DARPA, they all coincide with the next form of the corporation of the synthetic golden age from the Trump administration.
Unlocking, and accountants are kind of a bit reluctant. They say, well, this is a lot easier and you should really do it like this. And there's a mountain of objections. And then we've got the Children Wellbeing Schools Bill that's giving all children a digital unique identifier. And across the board, on and on it goes. And then an attempt to do it in different parts of working and surveillance.
Let's start with the King. A palace insider has revealed that King Charles has apparently been locked into an official plan to pass the throne on to his son, Prince William. So these are reports that the King has been working with palace officials to kind of firm up preparations if he decides to stand down. What should we make of this?
As the use of social media by children continues to stir a debate around the world and a lot of concern, King Charles sent out a timely reminder on the occasion of Christmas. I'm
going to go back because I read a long time ago that Donald Trump was also, his father was King Charles. And that, Donald Trump was also known as Prince William but it's interconnected to a different prophecy and a different conspiracy theory. I got to look more into it or whatever, because I remember seeing that right before we had the first shutdown when I was going through the Reddit forums, because I used to go through the Reddit forums, and that's why I get some like otherworldly information. But I heard that, like I said, Trump is actually the son of King Charles, and that the person he's passing his throne to is not the actual Prince William that everybody's talking about. Is actually talking about Donald Trump.
Look at this.
As the use of social media by children continues to stir a debate around the world and a lot of concern, King Charles sent out a timely reminder on the occasion of Christmas. In his annual Christmas message recorded at the Westminster Abbey in London, he suggested that we all could benefit from a digital detox to allow our souls to renew.
To this day, in times of uncertainty,
you heard what she said? Allow our souls to renew. That's what she was talking about. Reincarnation. They telling you right in your damn face.
Detox to allow our souls to renew.
to this day, in times of uncertainty.
So, like I said, that's what it is. Because one thing you got to understand is that when you get into the Gnostic text, I think Yaldabaoth, his other nomenclature title is Electro. Electro is kind of like another way to where, like I said, they got different ways to where they're able to manipulate physical existence. So an Archon, he can exist in, in animal kingdom. He can exist because an Archon has the ability to shapeshift, because Archon, this is pretty much their world. They become anything that, they can basically interface with anything in the Matrix because they created the simulation. They can manipulate the codex. So when you're talking about, when it comes to that, that's just, what it is when it comes to it. But I'm going to keep playing this video.
These ways of living are treasured by all the great faiths. And
that's why he meets with the Pope, because all, forms of monotheistic religion has to coincide with the digital ID system for a one world government. So, that's what I was getting to, because I lost my train of thought. So, in the Gnostic text, Yaldabaoth is known as Electro, the electricity interfacing with the human body, the siphon energy, right? The siphon energy in the form of reincarnation. Everything is a reincarnation trap. Everything is a energy extraction trap. Everything is based on energy extraction. That's what the Matrix is all about, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why she said that when she was talking about the moon, it was based in reincarnation in so many words.
Provide us with deep wells of hope, of resilience in the face of adversity, peace through forgiveness, simply getting to know our neighbors, and by showing respect to one another, creating new friendships. Indeed, as our world seems to spin ever faster, our journey may pause to quieten our minds, in T.S. Eliot's words, at the still point of the turning world, and allow ourselves to renew.
I mean, Dame Karen Bradley is a Tory, a very high Tory, and yet there she is going, well, the only problem with digital IDs is that Keir Starmer's, the way he presented them, the way he promoted the idea was a fiasco, but it's still got great potential. When we don't want these, do we? We don't want digital IDs. What is it about that simple statement that
and mind you, they want to implement digital ID before 2030, right? Right before 2030. And that's, like I said, that's for the sustainable development goals when you're talking about the agenda for 2030. The agenda for 2030 is nothing but mass surveillance in a form of a technocracy that is masquerading as a totalitarian, feudalistic regime, which is controlled by the Trump administration, because Trump is the last president. So that's what it's all about. A synthetic golden age, where they build a golden dome over the planet to block out the sun that we got inside. Because, like I said, that's what it's all about. Because in 2043, that dome is going to crack open. The firmament is going to crack open. That's why he wants to build a golden dome over the firmament that we already got.
politicians in Westminster don't seem to be able to understand?
I think the problem, Kevin, in Westminster is that politicians are in a bubble and it's sort of self-reinforcing. So on the one hand, they say we want to protect children and then we'll have a social media ban. That will mean everyone will have to digitally verify to get into the public square. Then they say at the same time, oh, hey, well, it'll be really convenient to make everything efficient because we can't implement a proper infrastructure and make sure there's efficiency and make sure there's economic growth and dynamism and wealth creation for all through our policies. So what we'll do is that we'll pretend that having everyone with digital ID will somehow make everything really efficient and smooth and ignore all the hundreds of millions of data breaches that are happening consistently that are really impacting the economy, that are really impacting the health sector, that are really dominating much of the tech arena, and that we know that this government is not going to be in a position to defend against. In fact, one login, which has got 8 million directors trying to be forced into at the moment by this government, has already had whistleblowers about it being susceptible to really lots of breaches. So I think they're in a situation where they think the technocratic stream, we're able to do this simple thing and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, everything will be much more efficient because they don't have the ideas and the capabilities and the will and the commitment to actually take on board something like let's look at the what the next 100 years could be like for what was the leading nation in the world in engineering, for instance, right? How can we lead the world in wealth creation, productivity, investment in infrastructure, dynamism, becoming a place where all those things happen, dealing with everything from potholes to borders, health and education. That's a very big set of tasks. So instead, what they're obsessing with is the idea that you can monitor and survey and track and then basically have a situation where the really smart people, or what they think they are, the really smart people, can basically constantly assess and evaluate all of us, the great unwashed. And it really is, in the end, about that, Kevin. And that's why we've got the pledge, at the Together Declaration, we've got a pledge that people around the country are signing and saying they will not, and I will not, upload digital ID of any kind onto my device, a government digital ID, or be engaged with one login or any of that.
I want to head straight over to the United States, where Sarah Rogers, who's a senior figure within Donald Trump's administration, she's raised privacy concerns around the introduction of digital ID in Britain. And it was funny because she actually said, especially by a government that prosecutes footballers for tweets, does this scheme pose huge security risks?
Well, I think we're yet to discover the technical sort of aspects of it. It certainly would.
See, another thing, what they're going to eventually do is that you got to watch the movie Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. Another thing they're going to do is that, like I said, it's going to be illegal for you to say certain things in public. Where that's what the flock cameras is all about. The introduction to all of this is the flock cameras, because the flock cameras, they have the ability to hear your voice. So let's just say that, oh shit, I don't fuck. Let's just say I don't fuck with these politicians. They can record that and they can, pretty much, put you in the negatives when it comes to your social credit score based on what you say in public. So that, like I said, it's another way to keep you in a degraded state to the point where you're not able to evolve in society, to where they want to keep you in a state of conformity. That's why I said they don't want you to think for yourself. They just want you to just shut up and follow their authority, pretty much. They don't want you to become the Christ. So like I said, that's what it's all about. They almost, like I said, that's why I said, think for yourself while it's still legal to. Think for yourself while it's still legal to. Because eventually it's going to be illegal for you to think for yourself. For you to just have free thoughts that's not even, connected to their systems and their ideologies of control.
Be helping Britain's image worldwide when it comes to emotional and I guess penitentiary risks. They are locking people up. People get locked up all the time in the UK, sometimes for tweets which are seen by maybe two people. And any resistance that the Trump administration is putting up to this is all for the good, and it's something I think we should watch very closely in Australia.
This is what Dame Karen Bradley said at the Home Affairs Committee. As I say, she's a Tory. She should be against this.
In fact, the inception of the mass surveillance in itself came from, the Patriot Act that was created by George Bush after 9/11. That was a whole multi-dimensional psyop that they created for that. That was a gold heist. It was another way to turn America into a police state. They signed the NDAA martial law bill. They signed many different executive orders through Obama's administration right after George Bush to basically George Bush and Obama basically threw up the motherfucking alley-oop to Donald Trump to have the digital ID system for the golden age. That's why I said Donald Trump, he's working both sides. They playing both sides because there is no Trump administration golden age if you didn't have 9/11. All of it, everything is pretty much planned. Everything is pretty much planned. There is no 9/11. I mean, there is no digital ID. There is no Agenda for 2030. There is none of these things if you didn't have 9/11 because they had to write the rules in place. They had to set it up with a psychological operation through a Hegelian dialectic principle. Problem, reaction, solution. Who's the problem? The people in the Middle East. What's the reaction? Cause a war. What's the solution? The Patriot Act, digital ID, flock cameras, shit like that. So that's how they do that. But I'm gonna get back to the transmission. Uh-oh. Okay. Put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. So you got that stuff going on. We got a few slides left. We ain't got too much left, and then we're gonna do some Q&A. And then you got the FBI plan to access license plate data, could track drivers nationwide. So it's coming. That's why I said you need to get your shit. You need to get your ducks in a row. Otherwise, like I said, get your ducks in a row. Try to make sure your plates and everything is straight. That way they won't be fucking with you, when it comes to that. If you do stuff illegal, whatever the case may be, and you watching my video, get your license in order. Otherwise, you know what I'm saying, they're going to look for different ways to pull you over. And this also can, raise, the likelihood of mass incarceration. So then you got the wholesale oil prices are raising rapidly in the industry. So oil shortage coming up. And then you got China. So this is also interconnected to the Economist magazine, because on the Economist magazine, they had these two meeting up in the month of October in the last transmission I did last week. When you look at in the beginning of the video, where I broke the whole the whole magazine down in month increments. And this can basically be set up for the great October surprise, because that's a lot of times that's where you have a lot of invasions during the time of October all throughout history. And then you got this going on. So like I said, they try to do everything they can to leave the motherfucking firmament. Because like I said, these extraterrestrial entities or whatever, when you had 1/3 of the galaxy that went against the order of Anu, they was casted out. When you talking about the 200 fallen angels, the cherubim. So these draconian reptilians, these archonic forces, when they fell, they had to live inside the caverns of the earth. So now, since, they're not under the jurisdiction of Inky, they under the jurisdiction of Enlil. So they're not able to live on the surface of the planet unless they have an actual humanoid vessel, pretty much. That's the only way they're able to live on the surface, if they have the ability to shapeshift through as far as like humanoid features and things of that nature. But I already broke it down. One day I'm gonna do a video on how these entities on how, the process of how they do the shape shifting and how they use like subatomic particle light technology to bend the photons and manipulate your perception with imagery and emotions. I'm gonna break it down on shape shifting. And also, when I was talking about this rocket, it says right here, 7-month hiatus, SpaceX, most powerful rocket ever built, is now even bigger and more powerful. Will it work? So, like I said, they're trying to escape the firmament. As I was reiterating in the beginning, they trying to build something to escape these entities that they said that live underground, like the Hopi said. A lot of these cryptids, when you go into cryptozoology, right? Let me see. Just like in the Hopi prophecy, he said, what he say? In the Hopi mythology, a lot of these entities, they live underground. The Hopi legends talk about the ant people, and they lived under earth to help humans. See, a lot of these entities, you got good ones and you got bad ones, but great majority of them underground are actually bad. So we're gonna get into so that's why they building this motherfucking rocket. They trying to escape. They trying to break the firmament, right? But the only way to escape the firmament, is that you have to have the ability to activate human emotion. Human emotion is interconnected to the heart chakra. They ain't got no heart. They ain't got no empathy. That's why everything they do is devilish and backwards, right? That's why you live in a backwards ass world. So now when we're going to get into the esoterics of biblical context, the transliteration of the book of Revelation by Dr. Malachi Z. York, L's Holy and Jill. So when you go to Revelations 14, 15, 14, 16, and it says right here, that sat up on a cloud that cast a sickle on the planet Earth. The planet Earth was reaped. So it's basically talking about the beginning points of the mothership. The messenger, Malachi Zadok, is sent to help the earth to reap the 144,000. So Theos, Revelations 14, 17. So Theos, remember I told you, Theos, this name right here is the true name of the Most High. Theos. This is where you get the word Thanos from. That's why they made him Thanos in the end game. This word right here, where you see my cursor at, Thehos. So Theos sent one messenger, Malachi Zadok, sitting on a cloud with his sickle, gathering the 144,000 in the Anunnaki Elohim in the form of Dr. Malachi York to planet Earth in order to give him 144,000. But I ain't mean to put this one up right here. Yes. So during the time of this, like I said, remember I was said that in Job chapter 38, verse 31, it talks about Pleiades unraveling the belt of Orion. So an Anunnaki messenger, Anunnaki Elohim named Enki, son of Anu, appointed to collect the souls of man, being called the angel of death, came out of the tabernacle, which is in the Orion skies, right? In the Orion skies, heaven is in the Orion, and that's the star constellation, or they call it Uranus in the Bible. And during this time period, this is where you see the 7 messengers are ready to release the 7 plagues upon earth, which is why you got the hantavirus. And then you got innocence. Innocence is a form of a big body of water. A big body of water is not only subjected to the oceans. Like I said, you also have spiritual waters in the cosmos. So the big spiritual waters in the cosmos, when you're talking about the El Nino 9 weather, you got the weather in the cosmos is being transmuted from the energy of the Uranus skies. So that is the marvelous 7 Angelos having the 7 last plagues for them filled with the wrath of Theos. So a lot of times, like I said, a lot of these forms of pestilence, A lot of it's man-made, but some of it is actually, being sent down from the cosmos. And then Els Holy and Jill, it goes more into the seven plagues and the wrath of Theos. And then Revelations 15:2, over the beast and his image and over his mark, which is why his name and the sea glass of having the harps of Theos. Yes. It is located, he said, this is the spiritual city. So when you're talking about Mount Zion is the ring and the peace with the Lamb. The sign of the Lamb is basically the personification of the non-ether beings. The non-ether beings are the carbonated beings. The carbonated beings are the Shemitic people of the Bible. The Shemitic people of the Bible are the autochthonous people in American, who is your so-called Negro, your so-called black person that's connected to the 5 civilized tribes. And these people shall ascend from Mount Zion to reign peace with the Lamb. This is a spiritual city which come from the heavens. It is located above the planet Earth inside the mothership. So this is also my, based on my own independent research, a mothership, that true spiritual sun that I was talking about outside the dome, the galactic center, that mothership, the North Star Polaris, the mothership and the North Star Polaris could be one and the same. Right? The mothership, because it only makes sense for your mother to give light to the sun and the moon to activate her child, which is Earth. When you understand hierarchy, that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So the mothership could be the North Star Polaris. When you look at, just type in the North Star Polaris and type in Freemasonry. If you don't know what the North Star Polaris is, that is the true sun. That's the real sun. The sun inside the simulation is the fake one. But the mothership is the true spiritual sun outside the dome, and that mothership is going to crack open, right? So this is why it says that the transparent enclosed reflection, jasper, golden lights from the stones, which makes up its foundation. This is why the Crystal City is called the Golden or Emerald City, just like in the Wizard of Oz. Follow the yellow brick road. This gives off the sea of the glass of effect. The great cities composed of precious stones, clear, transparent, as glass blended with fire because of its yellowish amber aura. And then this is where, yes, this is where the temple was already open. It was the dome of the witness. So this is basically talking about when the dome cracks open. So after this, I, John, son of Zebedee, solemn Saul, I did the temple of the tabernacle was already open. The dome was witness, Orion skies, the city, the dome of majesty. The shape of the crystal city was like that of a beehive, right? And then you just had recently Washington, D.C., the White House swarmed with bees. You had Israel swarm with bees. Because one thing you got to understand about the beehive is an octagon. An octagon is a representation of a protectorate. When you look at a woman's womb is a personification of an octagon, right? And also, when you watch the movie The Man Who Fell to Earth, when he came down to planet Earth, right, who was basically a representation of a fallen angel, when he came down, he came on a beehive type craft. It was like a honeycomb structure. So, there's a lot of, truth when it comes to our story, and when they try to make it, in a form of entertainment or mythology, there's a lot of truth behind it. So then shall not, and he said the Gentiles. I don't know why I screenshotted this one. Yeah, this is why. It said, then John describes the crystal city as a dome. So that's what I was getting into. I said maybe the planet has to go through a transmutation process. So it's like a form of metamorphosis, just like how your cells go through metamorphosis. Like when a black person catches malaria, it goes through a metamorphosis of single cell, which is crystallization. Maybe the dome is supposed to crystallize. That can be also a concept because, like I said, everything is pretty much a microcosm of the Most High. So we're going to get into some Q&A, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody put the questions in the chat. Everybody put your questions in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna get to some Q&A. The reason that is because, like I said, the atmosphere is starting to change. The atmosphere is transmuting into fourth octave ether. So it's kind of like the same thing as like when you go into a different planet, the atmosphere is going to be very heavy. It's going to be very, the volume and the density of the gravity is going to be very difficult. So the same thing is actually taking place. The planet is going through an ascension update. So with that being said, just like the planet, how the planet is upgrading, you should be upgrading as well. Because a lot of things that's interconnected to the old world, that's an old energy. So that's why you got to let it fade out in increments. Yeah, it's okay to smoke a little weed here and there, but just don't do it so much. Sometimes fall back from it. Take 3 months off, because a lot of times when you start to do something so much, it's going to create sensory overload. And sensory overload is how you compromise your nervous system. Your nervous system is the blueprint that's interconnected to the ideology of heaven and hell. So in order to cultivate your heaven or whatever, do everything in increments, and that's where you're going to reap the benefits of balance. So a lot of stuff, the cannabis or whatever, it has psychotropic energies on it, or it has a lot of pesticides. Everything in the matrix is compromised. I don't care what you say. It's kind of like the same concept as a motherfucker still selling drugs in 2016, thinking they finna go to the top like Al Pacino and Scarface. That's not happening. So that, a person to think with that mindset, you know what I'm saying, you got to be crazy. So for you to think that even if you vegan, everything is compromised. The water is compromised. I don't even care if you grow your own stuff from the soil. Everything is compromised, right? So since you know that everything is compromised, that means that you have to do everything in increments. Too much of anything is bad for you, right? That's how you ride the wave. You got to have a certain bandwidth in order to survive the matrix, right? You got to ride the wave of the matrix or you're going to drown. That's why I said you got to use it in order to get out. If you overindulge in the matrix, you're going to drown. If you try too hard to get out the matrix, you're going to drown. You got to find a balance. You got to follow the path of the middle way. Indulge in the matrix, fall back. Indulge in the matrix, fall back. Because over the course of time, that's going to create trial and error. Trial and error is, how you get information, and information applied is knowledge, and the application of knowledge is wisdom, and the precursor to wisdom is enlightenment. How the fuck you gonna be enlightened and you ain't experienced nothing in the matrix? How the fuck you enlightened and how you gonna give advice to somebody and you didn't go experience on certain stuff? It's some stuff that you ain't gotta experience, and I can just be like, I ain't gotta experience that in order for me to understand it. But sometimes you, like I said, man, like sometimes you gotta in order to understand everything intuitively, you gotta let your guard down. Because if you got your guard up too much, you know what I'm saying? This is why some people, they get burnt out on spirituality. It's the same concept as when you get a woman that used to be out here in the streets messing with everybody, and she go to church reformed, and she get, she just get oversaturated with it, and then she strays away from the church. That's why you get so many people in the spiritual community. They double dipping. They trying to ascend and they going back. They trying to ascend and they going back. You know what I'm saying? That's why when it comes to that. So also it has a lot of when it comes to the biochemicals that's inside of the cannabis and the marijuana. It has a lot of atrazine and it has a lot of aromatase. And aromatase has the ability to transmute the estrogen, no, your testosterone into estrogen, right? So what you're looking at is biochemical emasculation. Biochemical emasculation, right? So like I said, it's okay to indulge. Like I said, if you drink wine, like I said, it's okay to, do everything in increments. But I'm gonna get to some more questions. Okay. All right. Do you think they have shown us anything from beyond the ice wall? I don't think so yet. But I know they have meetings. Right before, you had the shutdown, is in 2021. You had some world leaders, they went over to Antarctica and they went to Lucifer's palace and they had a meeting with the negative faction of the Anunnaki. Look it up. You can look this up. You know what I'm saying? You might find it on forums because, like I said, the forums is where you're going to get the hidden, behind the scenes esoteric information. Because a lot of the people that, as far as like that's in politics, that wants to come out with certain information, they don't go to the media. They go on them forums. Them forums are when they got, uh unsearchable names and stuff. So they're gonna put a lot of information in forums. Okay, it says be there. You say upgrade, meaning growing, taking off the old man, putting down the new one. I feel like I've shifted. So when you're talking about upgrading is not only, subjected to upgrading your life from a materialistic level. A upgrade could be anything, like an upgrading of energy, upgrading on, how you want to look. Because like I said, when you change your mind, you change your vibration, that vibration becomes magnetism. So just you changing the frequency of your mind is an upgrade. Just by you saying like, hey, I'm gonna just start going to the gym every on these days, whatever the case may be. You built a new programming in your mind. Your mind is a computer system, right? So when you change your mind, you change your vibration. That's magnetism. So you can't manifest if you ain't got no magnetism. Just like, when it comes to source coding, if you don't understand the coding, you're not gonna be able to extrapolate an image that's gonna be projected on your screen, as far as like the imagery and the layouts or whatever. So your thoughts is interfacing with the matrix. That's how you manifest. Your thoughts have to be a form of magnetism. Uh, he's, Be there. What do you think about the concept of quantum immortality? Do you believe we have done this before? Are we watching the replay? Um, as I was talking about the ultra terrestrials, you got P-47s and P-50s. It's the present plus 47,000 years. So that means that your Zohar body, your multidimensional self, has the ability to interface with other timelines, right? So by way of, the law of thermodynamics, energy can't be destroyed, it can only be transmuted. So your quantum self is your etheric self. Your etheric self is your higher self. Your higher self is your Christ self. So you can't kill a Christ. You cannot kill a messianic energy. That energy lives in the ethers, forever. That's why when you heard the concept, oh, we don't die, we multiply, the same thing translates in the physical world, right? You're going to get another Nipsey. You're going to get another Bruce Lee. You're going to get another Tupac. You're going to get another Malcolm X. You're going to get another, anybody, what I'm saying, because like I said, by way of quantum immortality, the quantum world has the ability to interface with the physical world at the same time, right? So that's why, a lot of these true speakers, a lot of us, what I'm saying, is actually, ultra terrestrials. A lot of us is P47s and P50s, coming back in another timeline, basically trying to give ours, information to humanity, pretty much. So yeah, you can basically quantum leap by way of, certain mindsets or whatever. Let me get to some other questions. Okay. And if I don't get to your questions tonight, you can also hit me up on Instagram at BDL1014. I believe the link is somewhere in the chat. Is there still a possibility of a nationwide blackout? Yes, because I mean that's a part of the script. You gotta have the blackout. Because the blackout, see what they're gonna do is their blackout is basically a mimic of energy of the Phoenix event. The Phoenix event is the great solar flash. The great solar flash is when the firmament breaks open and kills the great majority of the matrix. It not kill the great majority, it basically eradicates the whole matrix once the firmament breaks open, right? So their concept of having a EMP attack or whatever, or just shutting down the grid system, that's just them hitting the reset button. But the real reset is the Phoenix event, the great solar flash. That's when the firmament breaks open. I'm gonna do a whole video. I'm gonna do an intrinsic breakdown of the Phoenix event, the great solar flash. I'm gonna get to one more question. I'm gonna get to one more question. Okay. Oh. So the solar flash from the outside the firmament. So what I'm saying is that the true spiritual sun is outside the firmament. That is the North Star Polaris. The North Star Polaris is the galactic center, and the galactic center is also a representation of the mothership. So when you look at the precessional circle of the equinox, you got different star constellations. So the Alpha Draconis star constellation was ruling the age of Pisces, which is why corporations and maritime law basically got jurisdiction over the indigenous people during the times of the moon cycle. So when the last sun cycle, so the sun cycle has to be aligned with the North Star Polaris. The North Star Polaris is the mothership. The mothership is actually operating off fractions of light, angles of light, that gives off intrinsic energy to the sun and the moon. So when you have the open vortex happens in 10-year increments from 1943 to from 1943 to 2043. So in 2043, that's when the sun outside the firmament, the star Polaris, the mothership, is going to give off neutrinos to planet Earth, to the point where you're going to have the firmament extracting and fracking open, right? So that's pretty much the whole ascension process when you're talking about that, because the firmament in itself is a representation of a spiritual cutoff. That's why it tells you in the Bible, God of the Bible was actually Satan. And God of the Bible, he separated the intergalactic waters from the third dimension and created the firmament. So just like when you have a firmament, that's just like throwing a person up in jail. That's just like throwing a motherfucker in jail and saying that, hey, you can't go outside the confines of these bars and these walls. Right? So that's why I said you got the illusion of freedom. You live in a prison planet controlled by archonic forces. And Enlil is the warden. Yahweh is the warden of this prison planet. And his little minions, the little archons, those are little correctional officers, little draconian reptilians. Those are little correctional officers, the little grays and skinwalkers and shapeshifters and shit like that. Little Jews running around. Those are nothing but correctional officers for the prison planet. But the warden, that's Enlil. I'm gonna get to one more questions. I'm out. And also, now, this is also, a lot of times, like I said, a lot of stuff that's happening from a metaphysical standpoint, as far as like celestial alignments and physical things that you can actually see with your eyes. The great majority of those things is actually taking place within us, because how you know that the great solar flash is not supposed to activate within you? So it can be some type of etheric combustion that's supposed to be happening inside your pineal gland. It could be one of those things, because like I said, when you get into ancient Kemetic spirituality, that pineal gland is interfacing with the sun. So a lot of stuff that they talk about in mythology and monotheistic religion, the great majority of it is actually talking about DNA activation, neurological upgrades, and biological metamorphosis. That's what it's actually talking about. And celestial alignments. Okay, one more question, and I'm out. So make sure y'all share this video, man, and hit the lights up, man, because like I said, they demonetize my page. So when they demonetize you, they're gonna try to put you like on the shadow ban. So y'all gotta stay on the updates. I'm gonna update y'all on my Instagram, on my Facebook, and stuff like that. So y'all know when I'm dropping. So y'all gotta pull up and then share the videos. Cause like I said, they're gonna try their best to manipulate this channel, because I don't understand how I got caught up into that BS. I wouldn't say Theos is the creator of the universe or whatever, but I think Theos has a creator as well. And I think that can be, the epitome of dark matter energy. So just by way, just like in the triple stages of darkness, when you're talking about the inception of time, in the inception of time, when you're talking about in the book of Genesis, it talks about how God said, "Let there be light." So if you the dark mother, the Vatican, right? That's why they showed the dark mother. They showed the dark mother in the Vatican, because they know that the dark mother is basically the womb of the universe. So the dark mother, let there be light, boom, come out the North Star Polaris, Theos, the mothership. Anu, El Elyon Els. It's the same person. So like I said, Theos, Anu, El Elyon El, Melchizedek, the North Star Polaris Galactic Center. It's basically the same person. It's just people just looking at mythology and they different in different timelines and different forms of scripture or whatever. So, like I said, the Dark Mother is what created Thanos or Theos or anybody, you know what I'm saying, as far as like when you're talking about let there be light. Everything started from darkness. So that light in itself could be that true personification of the North Star. Because just like I said in the movie Lucy, she didn't turn into light at the end. She turned into darkness. I'm going to get one more question in and I'm done. Enlil is the mean one, because when you break down the etymology of the word Enlil, En means Lord and Lil means sky, Lord of the sky. And they tell you in the Bible that Satan is the prince of air. So if Satan is the prince of air, that means that Enlil and Yahweh are basically one and the same. But Enlil and Yahweh is actually Yaldabaoth, and Yaldabaoth is Renfram, and Renfram is Kronos, and Kronos is Satan, right? The same person. That why you think when you talking about the when you go into the Talmud, why you think they go so hard for Baal and Moloch? It's the same motherfucker. Why you think the Ashkenazi Jews go hard for them? Same person. But yeah, Enlil is actually the bad. He's the benevolent one, right? He is the one who created maritime law. He is the archon who created the corporations for maritime law. That's why I said in El's Holy Angel, Revelation 17:17, the evil reptilian gave power to the beast. So that means that Enlil gave his kingdom. Remember when Satan took Jesus to Mount Sinai and said, I give you all of this? That's how you know that the God of this world is actually Satan. So the evil reptilian gave power to the beast. So Enlil gave his power to the Ashkenazi Jew who was in the caves, just like they showed you in the movie Dracula Untold. When he went to the cave, that's when he got his power. And they, at the end of the movie, they show him running the fucking world. Watch the movie Dracula Untold. Watch that right now. Watch that movie Dracula Untold, because at the end of the movie, you see that same man that went in that cave. He basically interfaced with he amalgamated with a draconian reptilian, got his power, ran civilizations, and at the end of the movie, he was running corporations. And then when you go to the movie, The Voyage of Demeter, right? Because when you break down the etymology of the word Demeter in Greek mythology, Demeter is the daughter of Kronos, right? And on the ship, it had a draconian reptilian, was like a gargoyle entity. And at the end of the movie, it shows you the tall black hats, just like in the movie Dracula Untold. So like I said, that's why you got to understand everything as far as like entertainment and mythology. They all basically coincide. Because you don't get, in order for a Dracula to exist, you have to have a Draco. A Dracula is nothing but a hybrid of a draconian reptilian and a human. That's what a Dracula is, right? That's why the words basically coincide as far as like the prefix of the word. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. And I appreciate you guys for pulling up, you know what I'm saying, holding it down. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty rocky out here in these YouTube streets. And just, you know, pretty rocky out here, you know what I'm saying, in the simulation in itself, because everything is getting exposed in real time. So much stuff is happening at the same time as well. So with all that shit being said, stay vigilant. Make sure you staying in the gym. Try to stay healthy. Do everything in increments. If you blow down, you know, do it, then fall back. Do it, then fall back. If you do other things, do it and fall back. Don't overindulge. Don't overindulge in anything. Because when you create, when you build up this energy in your mind to where you have the propensity to have a break, that's when you start to construct energy of discipline. You ain't shit without discipline, right? Because like I said, what are you without control? How you gonna be a god and you cannot control yourself? How the fuck you gonna be how the fuck you non-ether activated and you ain't got no discipline? When you got physical inanimate objects got more power over you. So like I said, take your power back, you know, ladies and gentlemen, and stay balanced. End of transmission.
I know it's been a long time since I last called you back.
Shit.
I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. Karma's gonna get to you and then you'll have a chariot with only one less friend. Now I had distant folks that are looking to my eyes to understand the wisdom he's given and his wealth from the skies. So thanks for this meal that I'm about to receive, and thank you for my health and all the good memories. Thanks for the courage, taking on another day. When I used to not believe, but now I know about grace. Stay away from the fire, cause the flames does burn. Go with your gut feeling, when it's wrong you learn. For every one step I take, the Lord takes two. And do unto others if you want it done unto you. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. This a completion, the selfish Proto-Grecian, Amerindian, Phoenician. I'm the last of the Mohicans, the bastard of the land, the pen, melanin, accretion. And we just trying to get back to the fact that we was kings and queens of a land before the avalanche seized it. I live on Turtle Island with the rest of the diseased. Better than the medicine for 7 different treatments. You try to ride away but end up getting seasick. The sleeping for my words like Braille and they're awakened with the penmanship of Hindu script written in them vacant monastery honorary payments to the prototype. Tomorrow's only a day away, but nothing happens overnight. The fuck's wrong with going left when you know it's right? Biting off more than I can chew, that's an overbite. Black on black crime is like watching 2 soldiers fight when all along they was on the same page. History. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land.